Gaming crossovers, taking separate games and characters and bringing them together in unexpected ways. We're all familiar with them. Marvel vs. Capcom, Kingdom Hearts, multiverses. It feels like a new series gets added every week to Fortnite. And for the most part, game developers are eager to bring their characters to a whole new set of eyes, and crossovers are a great way to do this. But of all the gaming companies, Nintendo has always felt the least cooperative when it comes to crossovers. While other game developers are often pretty chill, Nintendo is very particular about where their properties can appear. Having said that, Nintendo does do crossovers with non-Nintendo games and companies, but they need to follow one strict rule. Nintendo characters can only appear on Nintendo consoles. I think there are 3 different levels to Nintendo crossovers. So let's start with the first and quickest, what I'll call the mini crossovers. These are instances where technically there's a crossover, but overall it's pretty minor. Like with Rayman Legends. Originally, this was meant to be a Wii U exclusive, but it would later get delayed in order to also release on other platforms. Nintendo fans can rejoice though, because at least they can give Rayman and Glowbox a Mario and Luigi costume. Wahoo! And who can forget Skyrim for Switch? By scanning Amiibo or finding a certain hidden chest in the game, you can get the Champion's Tunic, the Master Sword, and Hylian Shield. Diablo 3 Eternal Collection also featured a Zelda crossover, an armor set designed after Ganondorf. The Nintendo Switch version of Rocket League features Mario, Luigi, and Samus's gunship-themed vehicles. However, if this vehicle is seen on any other platform, the player would instead see the default car. There's even a one-piece 3DS game that lets you scan Amiibo and give these Straw Hats Nintendo-themed costumes. This is generally what the lowest tier of crossovers consists of. Nintendo-themed cosmetics or items that are exclusive to the Nintendo console, but you also aren't missing out on a whole lot if you're playing on another platform. The game is 99% the same. But us Nintendo nerds can and will bully anyone that doesn't have a mushroom in their game. Now let's jump up a tier and take a look at the medium crossovers. These feature much more significant crossover content and can range from playable characters to fully exclusive modes. One of the most prominent examples of this is Soul Calibur 2. This game was on each major home console, but the kicker was that each version had their own exclusive character. PlayStation 2 had Heihachi Mishima, Xbox had Spawn, and the GameCube got Link from The Legend of Zelda. In 2002, this felt monumental, especially because Nintendo had rarely done any kind of crossover like this before. Generally, they would be in charge of the full project, not simply licensing out their properties. It seemed like a rare scenario where everything seemed complicated, but it all fell into place perfectly. And Link is just so good in this game. He's implemented so well into the 3D fighting game style while still feeling like Link, primarily using different sword slashes with the Master Sword, but also able to use some of his staple items as well. In 2013, Namco released a remaster called Soul Calibur 2 HD Online, meant to unite the different versions into one single modern package. But because this was only available on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, Link wasn't allowed to join them. So while Heihachi and Spawn were brought together, the roster is still technically incomplete. And that is the Nintendo way. There are also a few other fighting games that managed to snag some Nintendo content. Dead or Alive Dimensions for the 3DS has a stage based on Pyrosphere from Metroid Other M, with both Samus and Ridley appearing as stage elements. This came up because Team Ninja, the developer for Dead or Alive, also co-developed Other M alongside Nintendo, so that partnership was pretty seamless. But this game definitely isn't for good boys and girls, so what gives, Nintendo? Surprisingly, another example of this is Tekken. Despite being a long-standing series, there isn't much of an association between Tekken and Nintendo. To this day, only 3 of their games are on Nintendo systems: Tekken Advance, Tekken 3D Prime Edition, and the one we're concerned with, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition. Initially, Namco announced they were going to develop a new Tekken game for the Wii U. Eventually though, this just became a version of Tekken Tag Tournament 2, which would be a launch title for the new console. Because of Namco's support during a console launch, Nintendo allowed them to include special Nintendo exclusives. Every character can use one of 12 Nintendo costumes, coming from the Mario, Zelda, Metroid, F-Zero, and Star Fox series. There's also the exclusive Mushroom Battle mode, where different Mario items get thrown on the arena and can change the size or power of a fighter. In hindsight, this collaboration is extra funny, because after this release, there hasn't been a single Tekken game on a Nintendo console. They just have a really strange relationship overall. The Bayonetta series also got some pretty big Nintendo inclusion on the Wii U. Nintendo picked up the rights to publish the series, making Bayonetta 2 a Wii U exclusive. This also came with a port of Bayonetta 1 to the system, and both came with special Nintendo costumes and weapons. These costumes can change quite a bit. Different animations, visuals, sometimes bonus abilities that match the costume. And there's even a Chain Chomp weapon, which works exactly how you'd expect a Chain Chomp to work. Nintendo does occasionally get a little wacky and make multi-game deals with different companies, like they did on the Lunchbox. Nintendo and EA Sports partnered together to bring Nintendo characters to some of their GameCube games. The first of these was NBA Street V3. Alongside full NBA teams and legends from the past, you've got Mario, Luigi, and Peach looking absolutely ridiculous. I can't lie, as a kid, if I'd wanted this game, I absolutely would have leaned towards this version just because of this. It's hilarious to see Carmelo Anthony getting dunked on by Super fucking Mario. EA's next game with this deal was for SSX On Tour. This game was also mostly the same across all platforms, but once again featured Mario, Luigi, and Peach as playable racers. There was also a Nintendo-themed track, kinda, but this area was in all versions of the game, and the GameCube version simply threw in some Mario paint and some sound effects. But I never thought I'd see the day that I can make Princess Peach knock over children during their very first ski lesson. Sponsored by Old Spice. The final game of this partnership was Fight Night Round 2, the first and only Fight Night game to appear on a Nintendo console. This game doesn't star any Mario characters though. Instead, you can unlock Little Mac. Wow, what a horrible day to have eyes. This Little Mac is based on the redesign featured in Super Punch-Out, and it is very disturbing. Not only is this the inferior Little Mac design, it translates so poorly into 3D. But this is one of those perfect crossovers, warts and all. Nintendo's boxing character in a boxing game, you could easily see them just asking for Mario, but using Little Mac is the best possible outcome. And just for good measure, Nintendo allowed them to put the entire Super Punch-Out SNES game in as a bonus mode, which is how you unlock Little Mac in the first place. So you get 2 games and a hideous monster in one neat package. Speaking of hideous monsters, there is no need for me to tell you that Skylanders was a phenomenon. Not only did they sell millions of games and toys and make billions in revenue, they popularized the toys to life genre, which resulted in every company locking content behind plastic, including Nintendo. Which made it all the more surprising when Skylanders and Nintendo announced a collaboration where Donkey Kong and Bowser would appear in Skylanders Superchargers on Nintendo consoles and receive their own figures. Hammer Slam Bowser, and Turbocharged Donkey Kong, and dark variants for each. The bases of these figures allow them to function as both Skylanders and Amiibo, depending on what game you're playing. But I always found this strange. I mean, for one, it's directly working with one of your Toys to Life competitors. But for another, the Skylanders series wasn't exactly struggling on Nintendo systems. Quite the opposite. While it did well across the board, Skylanders was hands down the most popular on Nintendo consoles. And let's be real, that makes sense. I could understand if Skylanders was struggling on Nintendo and they wanted something to boost the numbers, but these games would have sold no matter what. Maybe Nintendo was asserting their dominance as the supreme plastic makers. After Superchargers released in 2015, Skylanders only got one more game before Activision announced the series would go on a hiatus that's still going strong 10 years later. But we still got Amiibo. This decline wasn't exclusive to Skylanders though. Disney Infinity and LEGO Dimensions were also winding down at the same time. Toys to Life was certainly successful, but when the market gets this saturated and you constantly need to buy new plastic, even for the games you already have, it was only a matter of time for customers to get fatigued. These companies realized it was way too expensive to develop games and manufacture these toys if no one was willing to buy them, so it was better to just close up shop while you're ahead. Which means it's the perfect time for a brand new Toys to Life game to launch. Yeah, in 2018, Ubisoft decided it was finally time to join this fad, 2 years after the fad died. Starlink Battle for Atlas was released for all major platforms, but the Nintendo Switch version of the game came with an added bonus, a crossover with Star Fox. Not only did they appear in the game, you could actually purchase a starter pack that came with an Arwing and Fox figure to use in the game. I just can't believe Ubisoft went ahead with this game in the first place. Maybe they thought they could recapture the Toys to Life audience, since they were coming at it with a unique genre, plus they would be the only ones on the market. If it weren't for the Star Fox collab though, this game would barely be a footnote. But Nintendo fans were desperate for Star Fox content, so this felt like a perfect match. But in the end, it wasn't enough to make this game sell even remotely well. The other Toys to Life games were ended for a reason. People were just over the fad, even if you have a Nintendo guy in there. There are so many more of these mid-level Nintendo crossovers. Every version of Minecraft on Nintendo consoles has the Super Mario Mashup Pack, a texture and skin pack that makes the game Mario themed, including music and sound effects, and even some custom worlds. I mean, it's still literally just Minecraft, but you can yippee and yahoo to yourself.
Yippee. Yahoo!
Project Cross Zone was a gigantic crossover game featuring dozens of properties, and while the first one didn't have any Nintendo characters, Project Cross Zone 2 managed to feature Fiora from Xenoblade Chronicles and Chrom and Lucina from Fire Emblem Awakening as playable characters. Monster Hunter has had too many collabs with Nintendo to list. These events would come with armor, weapons, costumes, even quests based on different Nintendo properties. But one of the strangest comes from Payday 2. An exclusive character was offered on the Nintendo Switch version of the game, a hacker named Joy, whose name and appearance are based off of the Joy-Cons. However, Joy wouldn't remain exclusive to the Switch. She was later added to the PC version of Payday 2 and would also be added to Payday 3, a game that isn't on a Nintendo console at all. As far as I can tell, this is the only time a Nintendo system exclusive character has made the jump to other consoles. It's a rule that's usually pretty strict. Which makes me wonder, does Nintendo even know about this? Nobody snitch. This video is sponsored by Belkin. Are you sick of traveling with so many cables that you kinda look like a flight risk? Well, Belkin's new Charging Case Pro can help. With the all-new Belkin Charging Case Pro, you can charge and carry your Switch 2 with one single item. This updated model improves on the standard one by adding a built-in internal power bank, which lets you charge your Switch without having to open the case. And you can charge while continuing to play without worrying about a gigantic cable sticking out, thanks to the case's hinge system. Just slide the Switch 2 in, prop the hinge up, and keep on playing. And it comes with the quality that you can expect from Belkin's 40 years of experience in the tech space. It's sturdy on the outside, so you know your Switch is safe. There's storage for game cards, a spot for cables or other accessories, and even a little slot for an AirTag or tile. And look at these three colors. You can pick one that really matches your vibe. This is perfect for those who are always on the go but cannot put their Switch down. Pick up a Belkin Charging Case Pro for yourself by using the link down in the description. But now, let's talk about the final tier. The Mega Crossovers. This category is more or less composed of games that exist purely for the crossover. Sometimes these are original ideas that just so happen to include crossovers. Nintendo and Square Enix partnered up to develop a basketball game for the Nintendo DS. Sure, why the hell not? Because of this, Square Enix was able to place 5 of their characters into Mario Hoops 3-on-3 as playable teammates. 3 of these were based on job classes from classic Final Fantasy games, and the other 2 were a Moogle and Cactuar, 2 recurring creatures throughout the Final Fantasy series. Mario Hoops was also the very first time Mario and Final Fantasy characters crossed over, but it wouldn't be the last. A few years later, a sequel to this game was released for the Wii, Mario Sports Mix, once again developed by Square Enix. While it still included basketball, this game also had volleyball, dodgeball, and hockey. All 5 of the Final Fantasy characters returned too, and additionally, Dragon Quest Slime Enemy was added as a playable character, officially making this game a 3-way crossover. There's also Mario plus Rabbids, an idea presented to Nintendo by Ubisoft. On paper, this makes no sense. A tactical RPG using Mario characters, knockoff minions, and guns? And I don't know how, but this somehow works. Ubisoft does a really good job of using the Mario IP but putting a twist on it. The Rabbid versions of characters are a great touch, and it's a great new context to try out a tactical RPG if games like Fire Emblem don't hold your attention. The sequels and DLC even brought more into the mix. Kingdom Battle had a whole Donkey Kong expansion, Sparks of Hope introduced Rabbid Rosalina, and its DLC even added Rayman. But Rayman and the Mario gang never actually interact. That's just mean. Sonic Lost World is another unique one. This game was a part of a deal between Sega and Nintendo to bring exclusive Sonic games to the Wii U, and as a part of that deal, Lost World ended up crossing over with Yoshi and Zelda in free DLC for the game. Frankly, this just feels so random. Like, these levels have nothing to do with Lost World, they just feel tacked on. Like, hey, check it out, it's Sonic and Link, wow! Please, buy a Wii U. But far more common than inventing an original crossover concept is taking a pre-existing game formula and fusing it with a Nintendo property. One of the earliest examples of this is Wario Blast featuring Bomberman for the Game Boy. This game previously released in Japan as Bomberman GB, but when Hudson Soft was looking to release the game internationally, Nintendo proposed a Mario crossover to widen the game's appeal. Aside from Wario's inclusion and some story changes, this is basically exactly the same game as Bomberman GB. Another instance was on the GameCube. Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. Not only does this let you dance to different Mario songs, it includes a full story mode that takes place in the Mario universe. I feel like the Mario aspect is a neat novelty, but it's not going to suddenly turn you on to DDR if you don't already like it. But if you love DDR and you love Mario, then this game is paradise. Fuck it up, Mario! Then there's the Itadaki Street series. These games are sorta like Monopoly. You want to purchase property around the board and invest in stocks in order to earn more money than the other players, and you make it back to the bank with the required amount of money to win. Itadaki Street has had quite a few entries since its debut in 1991, and many of these use Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy characters, since it was created by the creator of Dragon Quest and is owned by Square Enix. But in 2007, Itadaki Street DS released not only with Dragon Quest characters, but Super Mario as well. And this concept must have done well over there, because Nintendo was willing to publish a version of Itadaki Street for the Wii internationally, which ultimately became Fortune Street, once again with the Dragon Quest and Super Mario crossover. Puzzle & Dragons is a puzzle game well known for its collaborations, from Final Fantasy to JoJo's to McDonald's. And Nintendo also got in on the fun with a full Mario crossover game, Puzzle & Dragons Super Mario Bros. Edition. In essence, this is literally just Puzzle & Dragons with a Mario skin, but honestly, you can never go wrong with a tile matching game. You've also got Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, a crossover between the Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei series that was literally revealed by just saying, hey, it's a crossover between the Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei series. I've never played this one, but I know it has a decent battle system, and for some reason there are J-pop musical sequences, so take that however you want. And if you like musical sequences, you'll love Cadence of Hyrule, a crossover between Crypt of the Necrodancer and the Zelda series. Initially, this game was proposed as simple DLC for the Nintendo Switch port for Crypt of the Necrodancer, but Nintendo loved the idea, and it soon became a full crossover title instead. Movement and combat are done to the beat of the music, like in the first game, but the soundtrack is entirely composed of remixes and covers of Zelda songs, and the whole game is basically a Zelda game. Surprisingly, Pokémon has quite a few of these crossovers. Pokémon Conquest is a crossover between Pokémon and Nobunaga's Ambition, bringing the two worlds together into a tactical RPG where you become a warlord and also have a Pikachu. Pokken Tournament is, of course, a fusion of Tekken and Pokémon developed by Tekken's own Bandai Namco. While based on Tekken's gameplay, even to the point of some of the Pokémon performing actual Tekken moves, it also deviates by introducing phases. Battles can alternate between the field phase, which uses an open field, sort of like battles in the Pokémon anime, and the duel phase, which is essentially the standard Tekken gameplay. This game was available in arcades in Japan and on console everywhere else, and genuinely, it was pretty fun. I almost wish it was just like Tekken though. The phase shifting seemed to happen a little too often, but overall, I always have a fun time with this game. Many people don't realize that the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series is technically a crossover. The Mystery Dungeon series started way back in 1993 as a spin-off of Dragon Quest IV starring Torneko, a merchant from that game. This would then become a series featuring original characters and stories, as well as spin-offs of other series like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. 2005 is when Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team hit the scene, and the rest is history. But despite all of the entries, it's still technically all because of this silly guy. Occasionally, these crossovers are so successful that they just kinda get out of hand. Like, Nintendo's partnership with the Warriors series started back on the Wii, with Samurai Warriors 3, a game from the sister series of Dynasty Warriors. Nintendo saw a great opportunity to work with Koei Tecmo to include their own samurai character, Takamaru from the mysterious Murasame Castle. This crossover even included its own side mode based around Murasame Castle and a whole story involving Takamaru. This collaboration must have really impressed Nintendo, because a few years later they would announce a full crossover game, Hyrule Warriors for the Wii U, combining the elements of the Zelda franchise with the gameplay of modern Dynasty Warriors. This featured a unique story, dozens of playable characters, and honestly was just a really good time. Not only did the success of this result in a 3DS port that had exclusive content and 10 frames a second, but a definitive edition for the Nintendo Switch as well. And this partnership spawned more than just the Zelda crossover. Fire Emblem Warriors released for both the Nintendo Switch and new Nintendo 3DS with the exact same concept, just Fire Emblem. A unique story, dozens of iconic Fire Emblem characters, and fantastic Warriors gameplay. Now these two games were created as a sort of celebration for their respective series. But after that, Nintendo saw Warriors as a way to milk their successful games. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment are all continuations of their core titles. It's a pretty smart idea. The Warriors games are much cheaper and quicker to produce, but you can still use that medium to tell a story in these worlds that people fell in love with. Or completely retcon the entire story of the game if you want. The only downside to these Nintendo Warriors games is that you can't really play all of them all in a row. If you spend 200 hours across multiple Warriors games, the gameplay just becomes tedious and the spectacle kinda wears off. That's not to say they're not fun, not by a long shot, but there's only so many times you can do a combo into a finisher before you're a little sick of it. But the absolute king of Nintendo crossovers has to be Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. Not only is this a crossover between two gaming titans, but the Olympics too. 3,000 years was all leading to here. You know, I got so used to this series being a thing, but really thinking about it, this shit is weird. The biggest rivals in gaming are not only playing nice, but starring in a game together. And you're telling me skeet shooting is involved? I honestly would have expected this to be just a one-off game, but the fact it saw entries for nearly every Olympic Games for a decade is baffling. Obviously, Nintendo loves Mario sports games, but it just feels bizarre that this series was this consistent. And it's crazy that this is really the only Mario and Sonic crossover. Like, if there had been some kind of platforming game, maybe I could overlook how many Olympic Games we got. But just getting these games is just so strange. As long-running as this series was, it seems like it's finally come to an end, which is kind of a shame. I would have loved to see Sonic get stuck in traffic as part of the Los Angeles 2028 games. This video is by no means comprehensive. There are truly some random Nintendo crossovers that I haven't mentioned. Hello Kitty and Sanrio, Mercedes-Benz, Shaun the Sheep for some reason. Splatoon crossed over with... that's a lot. There was even an Animal Crossing villager that was a collab with 7-Eleven. And this doesn't even go into crossovers that could have been. Mario was potentially going to be in the Wii version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, but the two companies were worried about cross-contaminating the two. But I don't think Sonic and Mario fans would have cared. Link and Samus were proposed for the Wii version of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and despite a tech demo showing off the movesets, Nintendo passed. Epic Games were in talks with Nintendo to add Samus as a skin to Fortnite, but Nintendo insisted that she only be viewable on Nintendo Switch. Everyone else had to see a default skin. And this was a deal breaker for Epic, because they want the experience to be universal across every version of the game, and ultimately, the deal fell through. Tokyo Mirage Sessions was originally proposed as a Pokemon and Fire Emblem crossover, but because this game already existed, it felt like repeating a concept that had already been done, which is when the SMT series got involved. Going into this, I kinda expected to notice a pattern with who Nintendo will cross over with, but I'm kinda leaving more confused than ever. Genuinely, the only thing I'm still certain of is that Nintendo characters have to appear on Nintendo consoles. I kinda get the feeling I'm forgetting something though. Oh well, if I forgot about it, it's probably not that important.